If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 313, Fuck the Free World of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, joined today by the Ronan O'Gara of Irish MMA Media, Graeme McDonald, as we talk about a big weekend in the world of mixed martial arts with lots of fights last weekend. No fights next weekend.
Did O'Gara's team win or not?
They lost, I think, yeah.
Fuck's sake.
That's why I called you the Ronan O'Gara of Irish MMA Media, so there you go. But I actually wasn't watching it, but I think, I believe he's done a great job, although he's not their full manager yet, so he'll be their full manager next year, I think, so... You know, fair play to him. I'm sure they'll be winning even more next year than this year. But however, looking forward to talking a bit of MMA. Before we do that, we must give a shout out and tell you that we are supported by Manscaped. So support for the Severe MMA podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who's the biggest men's below the waist grooming place on earth. Big news from Manscaped. They just released their new cologne scent, which myself and Graeme were actually just talking about before the podcast started, and Graeme says he absolutely loves it. It's one... Honestly, the longest lasting scent I have ever used, and it's absolutely brilliant. So who knew smelling this good could be this good? Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. Join the movement for all your below the waist grooming needs. Everyone knows Manscaped has the perfect package 3.0 for all your below the waist grooming needs, but they didn't stop there. Complete your grooming game with the new refined cologne signature scent by Manscaped. With the same signature scent that's in all the Manscaped formulas, the cologne is a perfect complement to the collection. Light, approachable, and gentlemanly in the right ways. Think of it as your wingman for the night to keep you fresh and ready for anything. Calming and inviting, the signature scent introduces a light citrus burst before settling into the anchoring notes of Vevetor and woodsy masculine. I feel like I should be reading this in a golf voice. The 50 million spray cologne is even hypoallergenic, cruelty-free, dye-free, paraben-free, and 100% vegan. Beautifully designed glass bottle makes a statement, and the manly scent is attractive to set the mood. Also, that also wasn't a golf voice there, was it? However, be sure to check out the Perfect Package 3.0 with all the essentials for your below-the-waist grooming needs, including the Lawnmower 3.0. Have I it here? I do. Here we go. And crop formulations. Yes, I'm talking about ball deodorant.
I like your impression there.
It was accurate. It was accurate. All those stuff will keep your testes their besties. Now you can use the Manscaped Refined Cologne to complete your set and smell great anytime, anywhere. It's great to feel sexy. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code SEVEREMMA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code SEVEREMMA at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you. 20% off, free shipping, code SEVEREMMA, manscaped.com. Look good, smell good, feel good with Manscaped. Right, Graeme. What's Graeme McDonald in Irish? She's a Mac Pierce or something, is it? What's McDonald in Irish?
Jeez, I don't know.
You don't know? You don't know your own name in Irish? Jesus, I was going to start calling you that now. But anyway, come here to me, Graeme. Here's a little bit of a debate before we get into all the fights on. Because someone was, and we got into something in the comment section the other day, and it's something we've actually been trying to do more recently, is like, not just get into like going over fight after fight after fight, which there's fight after fight after fight these days, so we kind of have to do it a little bit, but we'll still do a little bit of that. But I want a quick couple of minute debate here before we start into the fights. There was a thing came up on Twitter the other day, and someone said, who is the best fighter in UFC history to never fight for a title? And I feel like I know your answer in terms of like not a singular name, but what you will argue about. But what do you think? Is there a name that sticks out to you, or is there something that sticks out to you when you say that? Who's the best fighter to never fight for a title in UFC history?
Oof, I'm trying to think. I'm probably missing somebody big, but
so I'll throw out a few names, like
fight for a title, even an interim title.
Yeah, Paul Felder, he retired last night, which I'm sure will. Cub Swanson.
No. Couldn't be the best, could they?
I don't know. Fedor Emelianenko.
For a UFC title, yeah.
I suppose that's cheating a bit, but I think the answer here is the next best guy now. And I feel like that's what will be your answer as well. Like,
well, that's kind of, well, that's not really, that's kind of, I think that probably is the case, unless it's, you know, a year ago or in the last few years, somebody that you could maybe argue. But if you're going back all the way to Fedor in terms of, you know, in terms of his competitive ability at the time, he was brilliant. But if in terms of his actual abilities versus, you know, somebody at the same kind of upper echelon place as Fedor was held now, it's a different story. But you know, Fedor definitely is one that you know, for years a lot of people wanted to see come to the UFC, wanted to see you know, even Lorenzo Fertitta, basically he I think it was he said that he offered 30 million for 5 fights or 30 million for 6 fights or something. So they really did try to make it happen. You know, sometimes the UFC don't try to make these things happen, but they did, and it just didn't happen. But you know, I think it would have been brilliant to see him come in and fight for the UFC title, and it was definitely an opportunity missed. But I think, yeah, definitely, you know, guys now are on a different level skills wise to even Fedor. You know, what was dominant back then wouldn't cut the mustard at all today.
Yeah, like, guys to me stand out, like someone like Benil Dariush, even, who's fighting last week, or Zabit Magomed Sharipov, or Islam Makhachev, or someone like that. You know, those sort of guys stick out as they might not have like the muster of a Cub Swanson or a Fedor or something like that. And you know, I said it to him because Cub fought in the UFC and should have gotten a title shot at one stage, I think, and missed out on it. And you know, Felder are good fighters, but got kind of guys like that who've been around for a good while and never managed to get there. Like this, a lot of guys do these days. I'll say, I'm looking through the rankings here. Say someone like, say, Gilbert Burns, a very good fighter. He's got his title shot. Damian Maia's got a title shot. Wonderboy obviously got a few title shots and stuff as well. So there's a lot of, I suppose, Tony Ferguson. I know he got the interim title shot, but he never got the you know, the actual one. So yeah, I think it's an interesting debate. And
well, yeah, for the example, you know, so just going back, the most recent, you know, like Rob Font, if you look at his, like, you know, ability compared to some of the other guys we're talking about, even Fedor, I think, you know, maybe people who are fans of Fedor won't like this, but I think it's pretty clear cut that, you know, Rob Font's skills would be a lot better than Fedor's skills, so he'd be ahead of Fedor in the rankings if you were looking at it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's I suppose we can transition over and talk a little bit about Rob Font and his performance last night.
You know, we've been talking for years about people needing a job, and he you know, he has a job and he uses it so effectively. And you know, maybe you know, the guys we were listing like Fedor, and they didn't really, you know, it was more of a less technical, more kind of balls to the wall style with Fedor. It wasn't you know, as cultured or as slick as the striking of, for example, a Rob Font, and the jab, like using your distance really well, and just being an all-around very smart MMA fighter, and executing, the ability to execute game plans, I think, is on another level than, or the game plans themselves even are on another level than they used to be as well. So there's a lot of factors going on there that make these current fighters like Rob Font, like, just the game just evolved so quickly. We always talk about it, like, if you're out for 3 years or two or 3 years more, then the game's going to likely have passed you by the time you come back, unless you've been extremely active in the gym. And you know, somebody like a Nick Diaz, people want to see him come back. I want to see him come back, but if he does come back, he's probably going to look like a relic.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. That was one of the thoughts I had, because I remember when Dwayne Ludwig went into Team Alpha Male and he kind of changed TJ Dillashaw around, and even I think those lads kind of fighting Dominic Cruz made them adjust their style to fight even better. And then we saw TJ kind of coming through and look really good, and then Cody coming through with his kind of boxing style, and we're thinking like, oh, there's not many people around doing this or doing this as well as there. And you know, they've obviously fought each other, and it was like, oh, who's going to win between them? And like, I think a lot of people at that stage kind of thought those two lads were kind of the new era of one of the best divisions in the world, and in a way they were. But I think, you know,
just don't last very long. Yeah, the Matida era.
Yeah, that's it. But like, sometimes when you have an apex like that, like I'm sure you could probably talk about Conor McGregor coming through looking at Jose Aldo. When you have someone that good at the top of your division, or you know, Chris Weidman, when he came through, was looking at Anderson Silva the whole time. When you have someone that good at the top of your division and always pushes you to be as good as them in that realm. Like, I even said to someone like an Ian Gary coming up, I asked him one of his recent things about Usman, and you know, he's looking at him and looking at his style and seeing that, look, you need to be a really good wrestler, you need to be a really good striker, you need to do it all. And I feel like those lads right there, and with Cruz before them as well, and and others as well. I'm not leaving anyone out, but I think they produced such good technical fighting that it moved people on. Like, I think Demetrius Johnson is a similar kind of guy. It's just they rose the level of what it meant to be great.
If Henry Cejudo had to come in and just steamrolled everybody, would he have gotten so good? Would he have looked so much improved after his Demetrius Johnson loss?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He had to. I think it's more likely that he would have just kind of, stuck to what he was doing if everything had been if he had had it easy, you know what I mean? But he had to, because Demetrius Johnson was so good, and Henry Cejudo such a you're such a strong competitor, and ego, even like if you're an Olympic gold medalist, you need that. You're not just going to accept, oh well, I'm second best in this division, you know what I mean? So that definitely would push you on to become a better fighter. And he improved fight to fight even after the Johnson fight. So I think that's a good example of somebody who was pushed. You can look at other sports, Liverpool and Man City a couple of seasons ago, would they have got 97, 98 points if they weren't chasing each other? No, they probably would have got 89, something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very true. And I think last night was a good example, because I think I was thinking about that fight afterwards and the way Cody kind of got handled I think he got handled for 4 rounds. I think the first round was relatively close, but I don't think a few years ago that would have happened in the same sort of way. I don't think Rob Font or anyone would have had that technical ability to beat Cody in that sort of way. And I think you look at last night, right, and we'll talk about Cody, and I think Cody had a few issues, and we'll talk about them in a second, but if someone fought Cody last night and they weren't as 100% on it as Rob Font was, I think Cody would have grown into the fight a little bit, and maybe not have won, but would have done a lot better and would have landed a lot more shots. The problem is, when you're Cody Garbrandt, right, and you got a good knockout in your last fight, but your confidence isn't what it used to be. And if you watch Cody Garbrandt and he's up and coming days, even the Dominic Cruz fight, where he's looking into the crowd and he's dancing in the middle of the cage and stuff, he's ultra confident, ultra slick. He's throwing his combinations all the time, not even thinking about it, getting his head out the way, and then he gets knocked out a few times, and that kind of all goes out the window.
The momentum's gone, the confidence is gone. You're second guessing yourself. If you look at this fight compared to the strategy and the style Cody implemented in this fight compared to a few years ago, he's trying to be a different fighter.
Yeah, totally.
You know
different.
what I mean?
I'm not sure if he can be the same fighter.
Yeah. He even had a little bit of success when he kind of abandoned that in moments.
Yeah, he did.
And, it's a risky strategy. We've seen it go against him before, where his chin maybe isn't the best, but maybe in the 5th round he tried a little bit as well to kind of put it on the line, but he just I think was too tired and beaten down by that stage.
I think it was as well. My kind of point there as well is I don't think if this sort of performance came from Cody a few years ago, you would have had the quality enough for someone to make it a bad night for Cody. My example in this fight is, right, Rob Font, when he was on the front foot, when he was landing his jab and his shots after it, when you've that good of a jab and your combinations are that good after it, and your head movement and you're moving away and you're defensively good, it's always going to be good. But I think the thing that really, maybe not really won it for Rob Font, but I think that extra maybe 20% at the end of it that took him from maybe a 49-48 or a close fight into a domination was when Cody was throwing his jab and even landing it, there was nothing coming after it from Cody, but there was from Rob Font. Rob Font was almost using, at times, not all the time through the fight, but at big important times, he was almost using Cody's jab and Cody's lead, whatever the shot might be, as a setup, as kind of his own jab to start things out. And I think when you're Cody, right, and you're getting defensively and offensively for Font dominated, and then when your offense is turning into offense for your opponent, what can you do in that situation? It's so tough. And I think the only thing to do is to be more confident. Don't let him counter from your jab or from your lead. Throw a lead and then throw one after it, and then throw another, and then throw another. And as you said, Graeme, in the 5th round when he did that, in the first 2 or 3 minutes of it, he had success. But the problem is when Font hit him with a couple of shots, Cody, it's not that Cody wilted, it's just that like he was, here we go again. And that happens so often. I think it happens a lot in boxing, you know, when guys try to come back late in fights in the 11th or 12th round and they're like, oh, come on, we're going to knock him out, and then he like lands one jab and they're like, okay, wait, no, we're back into, you know, how the first 10 rounds have gone. And that kind of, to me, was what happened in this fight. It was a beautiful performance from Rob Font the whole way in every facet of it. What did you think? I was actually going to text it to you.
What about Font's takedown defense? Did you think that was a bit suspect? If we were going to be critical?
If you're looking forward, yeah, I think like. Do you think it's Rob Font's takedown defense, or do you just think Cody has never gone for takedowns before and this is the first time and he's actually a good wrestler? I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest.
Well, yeah, also on that, I think a lot of people were saying, oh, maybe Cody looked like he was feeling the effects of COVID or something.
100% was the next thing I was going to say.
Yeah, I think that, it's hard to know. I think that maybe part of it, like we've seen, like I suspect like somebody like Mane, you know, ever since he came back, he's just been a Liverpool football player. He's just been off the boil, and we've heard of other sports athletes and stuff say that it's like this long-term COVID. I think maybe it did have something to do, but I think also, you know, wrestling when you're not used to it is more tiring than, you know, it would be if you're fighting your natural game. So that probably played into it too. And also, you know, getting punched in the face with a jab and combos doesn't help your cardio either. So it's hard to know. Like people seem to want to make that what it was, but it probably played a bit of a factor. But I'm not sure how much of a factor that played. I think it was more Rob Font just, you know, punching him in the face and him having to go out of his natural game and having to go for takedowns when it's not really in muscle memory the same as it is for his normal game on the feet.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of both of it, to be honest. Like, I looked at Cody. If you look at Cody at the start of that fight and look at him at the start of other fights or normally coming into fights, I do not think, and you know, I'm not being critical of Cody here, I just think it's critical of the situation. I don't think he looked in the shape that he normally looks in. I don't think there was that, you know, that six pack that he normally has, that cut down he had. Like, you know, there's a lot of people talking about, or him talking about moving to 125, and you know, we've talked about it before that he doesn't look like he has much to cut to get down to 125. He kind of did a little bit last night, like. And Cody Garbrandt is guy. You can say what you want about Cody, but Cody always comes in shape. And even, you know, I know we've talked before about guys like Aldo. If they have injuries, they will pull out and they will not take the fight so they can come in 100% in shape. And that's what they should do. And I think Cody is one of those as well. He's had no problem before pulling out, but I think he probably didn't have any injuries in this, but just didn't have that gas tank to get there. And I think people are maybe underestimating it a little bit what can be, you know, as you said with Mane, but I think, you know, Pogba was like that a little bit. It took him 3 or 4 months to kind of get back to playing well. And I think St. Maxim, who plays for Newcastle as well, he's kind of carrying an extra bit of weight. And there's a few different people, and especially with sports. I was reading a thing before, and I think Leah McCourt was actually talking about it as well, how it affects people and how sports people, you know, they have to drive to a higher level of cardio than even normal fit people, you know, to get to where they need to get to. And MMA being one of the highest level of all, they need, you know, to go balls to the wall for 25 minutes like Cody Garbrandt was challenged with doing last night. So it's a very, very it's a very tough situation for him to be put into. And, you know, even looking forward, if we're talking about Khamzat Chimaev coming back as well, he's another one who's had a very, very bad bout with it. So this is something, you know, that could be ongoing. And it was still, I think, we seem to forget about it at times as well. But a lot of places, not necessarily are in lockdown, but some people, and, you know, in America, I mean, some people would maybe be keeping themselves to themselves or keeping the gyms maybe not closed, but to smaller groups and stuff like that. And for some people, it's great. And for some people, I'm sure there's struggles there and there's issues. And like Cody as well, fighting with Mark Henry, or training with Mark Henry and training with Team Alpha Male as well. They're on opposite sides of the country, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very, very tough situation. So, you know, it's I didn't think he looked his best, but all credit to Rob Font. I think we were both. We've always been big fans of Rob Font, and I think. Yeah,
like I picked Rob Font in this, but I think it was more impressive, more dominant. I thought maybe, you know, the first round was kind of close, but I had all rounds for Font. There was I was thinking maybe one could have been a 10-8, but I think it was the fourth, but just about not. And I was expecting more, maybe 48, 47, 49, 46 with the rounds being closer. I think, Font, I think he's, people are kind of underselling how well he did with his jab and his combinations behind it, that in Cody's game was able to frustrate Cody and tag him repeatedly. And, I think maybe the COVID thing and Cody looking, as you said, people pointing out Cody didn't really look the same physically going in, stuff like that. But I think, Rob Font basically, biggest fight of his career so far in a main event, goes out there and, puts on a clinic. And it's easy to forget, like, sometimes when the winner, when the opponent really maybe doesn't look up to their best, but a lot of the time that's to do with, the game plan and execution of the game plan, the skills of the other fighter. And, Cody, it's like, it's hard to know what you do with him now.
Yeah.
Like 125, I don't really like for him. I don't know.
His chin looked all right last night, though. That is one thing I would say. He took a lot of big shots in there, and he kept coming. And I think I criticised Mark Henry a little bit before for his game planning and stuff. I wouldn't criticise him too much after last night, but I think maybe he has made Cody a little bit better defensively in terms of like not getting into those wars immediately. Like, has that taken away from Cody a little bit? I think
it has, but maybe in the short term it has, but maybe with a bit more time he can, him and Mark Henry can kind of, develop it and make it a more feasible style at the top level. But, I think that Cody, he's very well rounded. I think they said he basically has 100% takedown defense. Mm-hmm. So, like, he's definitely a really well-rounded, high-level fighter. But do I see him ever kind of getting back to the top? I don't think so now. Like, I just don't think so.
It's tough to see. It definitely is tough to see. But, for Rob Font, it's the opposite. And I saw him last night saying that he loved the matchup with Petr Yan. And I think that's a very, very fun matchup. And obviously, Sterling is the champion at the moment. And that, to me, is I think he said it himself. It's a tougher matchup. And when he said it, I was like, I suppose it kind of is. Although Yan is a tough matchup for anyone. But the way he kind of matches up with Yan, the way they both strike, I think it's funny, and this is maybe a wider point as well, not getting into going fight by fight, but I was watching the Bellator the weekend, and Alexander Shabliy fighting Alfie Davis, and Alfie Davis, anyone knows, is a very good fighter, but Shabliy, this Russian guy, 19-3 coming into this, 20-3 coming out of it, and saying like a guy who's been fighting on the Russian scene kind of comes out of nowhere, a bit, people on the Russian scene and people who watch the Russian scene obviously know very, very well about him. But these guys kind of emerge from nowhere, and there's so many of them now coming from the Russian scene. I joked like every champion in Bellator and UFC is going to be Russian in a few years. And do you know what? It was going kind of half a joke because these guys are so good coming through. But I think the way to beat these guys is something like Font did last night. And if you're looking at Font versus Yan, and even when we were looking at Sterling versus Yan, I think you need a high output, high cardio game. We have, because a lot to do maybe with the judging criteria, but a lot to do with how MMA has kind of progressed. We're into a very kind of hard striking, bludgeoning sort of game these days. A lot of the top guys are that. Like, even look at Yan, he hits really, really hard. Maybe not the same output as, or a bigger output than his opponents would in a fight. Like, before, we went through a phase where there was like high output, and the guys winning fights were landing, however many shots around to win it, way more than their opponents. I don't think that's the case with like the top fighters, the champions these days. I think they're landing more effectively, but I think maybe the way to get around that is to land a lot more shots, to stop their effective shots, and you to win rounds like that way. I think, and you need a very good, unbelievable technical game. You need a good chin, and you need really, really good cardio to do that, I think. And that's going to be hard to do, but that's the challenge, I think. We talked about at the start of this podcast about you seeing the guys at the top and seeing a way to get around them. And I think that would be my prediction of the way to get around them at the moment as well. So I think it's a big call for a guy like Rob Font to even rise his game further, to fight guys like Yan and Sterling at the top of that division. And I think for all people coming up, like if you're if the likes of Makachev is coming up in your division, or Magomed Sharapov or Shabali or Magomedov in the Bellator 135 pound division, those are guys you need to be preparing for now, not the champions. I think, it's the next champion you need to be preparing for, and there's a lot of preparing to do if you're going to be on par with those guys. But however, Graeme, I'm going to move over, speaking of Bellator, to Leah McCourt's fight, and we'll pop back to the UFC and we'll go through and we'll give you the results of those fights and get into a couple of things that I want to talk about, including a bit of odd matchmaking in that one. But this Leah McCourt fight, obviously we're an Irish MMA podcast, so Leah McCourt had a really big fight. She's obviously ranked in that division. Janae Harding is ranked in the division as well. And it was a really, really great comeback. I suppose that's the first thing you have to say about it. Leah McCourt showed absolutely great heart. It looked at one stage that she had kind of turned away and that the referee was just about to stop it, but she absolutely never stopped for 1 second, and she was attempting to protect herself. And when Janae Harding kind of got up after Leah had been hurt, Leah hit her with that big up kick and then got her in that triangle and was able to submit her. It wasn't the best start in the world. She missed weight as well, which is obviously a big issue and something that she's going to have to address going forward, and she's going to have to make. And maybe, I'm not sure what her reasons were for it, but, quarantining, coming from Ireland, going over to America and stuff, I'm sure that was a bit of an issue as well, and hopefully that won't be the case by the next time she fights, and we'll all have our vaccines and everything like that, and it'll be all okay. But it was one of those fights where it was the biggest win of her career. There was a lot of things to work on, though, which I suppose is, for a fighter who wants to improve and wants to get better, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you don't want to be taking that amount of damage either, I suppose, in fights. But all in all, a great win for Leah McCourt. How did you see the fight, Graeme?
Yeah, it definitely looked like the fight was getting away from her. It swung the other way. Like, she started well, and I think we said like every time we've talked about Leah that she's definitely still young in her career and still very raw and green, but she showed some things in that fight. She showed a toughness and resilience that, like, you don't really know that people have until you see it. So that's a good sign. But there was definitely a lot of things, as you mentioned, to for her and her camp to work on from that fight. It's great to get out with a victory and kind of have the lessons of a defeat nearly to work on and to close the holes in her game. You mentioned the weight. Yeah, she like, it wasn't even close. That's not good at all. She seemed to tire out in the fight as well, which maybe there was something in correlation there with the weight cut. It's hard to know. Maybe we'll find something out after, in the next few days or whatever when if she does an interview. But it was a win. It was good matchmaking. I think it was a win that she can take and use to build herself. I think if she had gone in there and destroyed Harding, was it Harding is her name? If she had went in there and destroyed her, then maybe they would have catapulted her up quicker than is advisable. So maybe getting this is probably the best possible outcome she could have had, really. Yeah. Showing that she, to herself and to everybody, that she has the toughness and resilience to come through bad spots, and also getting the win and having these things to close in your game. Like, this is very early days in the career. I think a lot of people forget that because they've been following some of these Irish fighters for a long time, throughout their amateur career and their pro career. So it seems like they've been around a lot of time, but they're still inexperienced at the pro level. And going in against a more experienced fighter and coming through adversity and winning is definitely a good step. But it's probably going to work out for the best that she doesn't get catapulted into the title picture in the next few fights.
Yeah, look, I think that fight kind of, and I agree with everything you said, I think that fight kind of showed what Leah is. In the first round, she had those couple of big high amplitude takedowns, and when she got to the ground, she looked very good on the feet. There wasn't much on the feet. There was a lot of clinching in the first round, but when the fight was on the feet, Harding was landing a few shots, and in the second, because I think the biggest issue I would think for Leah was when the takedown was kind of stopped, and when Harding was able to clinch with her and win that kind of battle to get her back out on the feet, that Leah kind of not panicked as such, but that's something that comes with experience as well. I think you to find other ways to get out, to maybe circle one way, to not go straight back and with the head up in the air kind of and take those shots that she did from Harding. When she did that, she was obviously getting hurt an awful lot, but you know, the resilience after she was hurt after it looked like it was going to be finished, to come back, to have the perseverance to get through it, and the intelligence to land that up kick and get the triangle, it was really, really good. And that's something you don't see often from fighters in that situation. You don't see kind of home run submissions or knockouts, and she almost got both of them, you know, in that fight. You don't see that much in MMA. So that is a huge thing, I think, for Leah McCourt going forward. She's kind of proven that she won't wilt. She has great heart, and she has the ability to win a fight like that. If she can get the striking together, if she can get better defensively, there isn't much between her and the top of that division, because well, when I say the top of that division, Cyborg aside, you know, aside from Cyborg, I think Julia Budd is a very good fighter as well, although her last performance wasn't great. But even if you look at the likes of Leslie Smith, you know, I think if Leah was to improve her striking a good bit where she's even defensively good, I think she's very strong and good on the ground, and if she could get someone like that to the ground, you know, in 4 or 5 fights time, it wouldn't be the worst, you know, matchmaker or mismatch in the world. So she is in one realm of her game, not far, but in probably the toughest realm of it in the striking and defensive striking, especially. I think it's far away, and she needs to improve that an awful lot. But she'll know that herself, I'm sure, and she will be improving with Owen Roddy as well. But look, the Bellator rankings coming out, and for some people, like says for like a Brian Moore, ranked number 9. That was great for him because he wants big fights. He's ready. Brian Moore's at the stage of his career where he's in his prime, and he's been there for probably a few years now, and he needs the big fights now. But for the rankings for the likes of Leah McCourt and even Janae Harding, who are not at the peak of their career, who are still rising, but they're ranked like number 5 and 6 or something like that, that's an issue for them, because they're going to be ranked with someone like a Leslie Smith or like a Kat Zingano or someone, you know, like a Sinead Kavanagh. And I know Janae Harding, you know, she fought Sinead Kavanagh, she beat Sinead Kavanagh, but it was a cut, and Sinead Kavanagh was dominating that fight. But I think that's an issue with the Bellator rankings in this division as well, especially. And I think backwards rather than forwards is the way that Leah and Janae should probably both be looking at this stage. But a really, really great win for Leah McCourt. And, you know, hopefully if they can get a card back to Ireland at some stage, maybe towards the end of the year. And I don't know if they will be able to or not, but if she could get on it, and Peter Queally and James Galler and stuff, it'd be absolutely great to see that again. So it was a fantastic win. And, you know, it's been a great couple of years for Leah McCourt, headlining over in Dublin and getting this big win as well. It's, you know, and I think she does a fantastic job all around in the commentary and getting herself out there and getting on BBC, and her fighting now as well. If that can keep improving and pick up. And she seems to be, you know, she's always travelling over to Liverpool, training with those boxers and training with Molly McCann as well. She does she's doing everything that she needs to do to get to the very top. Can she do it? That's the joy of MMA. We'll see. You know, we'll see over the next couple of years. So, very interesting fight there, and a great win, and fair play to Leah McCourt. I want to talk a little bit about matchmaking, Graeme. You mentioned it there a minute ago, and I think the two fights I kind of want to mention are one from Bellator, which was Valerie Loreda, and she fought Hannah Guy. Lost that fight, but the main one I think was Jack Hermanson versus Edmund Shabazi. And first of all, actually, so the Valerie Loreda fight, I thought she came into this fight and showed very good takedown defense. I thought she looked good on the feet, as she always does. But the problem with her were like the in between bits. You know, she kind of like Leah, when the fight was against the fence, and when she kind of came out from the fence and was back in the open, that kind of transition there was the area I think she was getting caught in a little bit, or caught up in even maybe a little bit. For Loreda, she stopped the takedown very well, but then couldn't disengage and get back out to the striking. And it was that area. She did all the hard work. She did the hardest thing, the takedown defense. She stopped the takedowns, but then managed to get taken down or taken to the ground anyway, rather than taken down in that position after she'd stopped the takedown, which is kind of defies the point altogether. And Hannah Guy did a great job on the ground. She got one big takedown against her as well when Loreda threw a big spinning shit, which her corner went mad about. But I actually think this fight for someone like Loreda was a good fight, you know, and this is the sort of matchmaking where she's 3 fights in, her opponent was 3-1 as well, so nothing wrong with that, but she's a good, tough, test for her. Not the greatest fighter in the world, but someone who's smart and intelligent for that amount of experience, which Loretta needed. And I think if she had won this fight, I think it'd be a learning experience. But the fact she lost this fight, I think it can even be a better learning experience for her. She didn't take that much damage or anything like that, but it shows what she needs to do to improve and to move on. And you know, you also make a bit of a star in Hannah Guy as well. I think she was very, very good. But the opposite side of that then, I think, with the UFC and with Shabazian versus Hermansson. Shabazian in his last fight, we all saw it. He kind of got, you know, the hype train got derailed a little bit. And I still think Shabazian, I still think he's one of the best prospects in the world, and it's at middleweight and at any weight, to be honest. He's fantastic. He really has it all. But when you get a guy and he takes an all merciful beating in one fight, and then you don't move him back altogether, and you put him in against a killer like Jack Hermansson, especially on the ground, and then he wins the first round, right? And he does very well in the first round. I didn't think it was a million miles from a 10-8, but then gets taken down and then gets beaten up again and then gets more confidence just sucked from him. What is the need of that? Like, why do you need to do that to someone right now? Give him 5 fights before you put him into a fight like this where he could have more confidence off him. Let him build up that confidence. Let him put him in a position where he can be the best fighter he can be. I spoke to Spencer Kyle. He'll be coming out on Wednesday. A really great episode of the State of the UFC, where we spoke about the best fighting the best when they are the best. The aim of UFC matchmakers, the aim of any matchmaker should be to get the fighter to where they are at their absolute best, at the very top of the division, to become a championship level fighter, fighting another championship level fighter. I just do not think putting Edmund Shabazian in against Jack Hermansson was going to get him to that state, was going to get him to where he can be his best in the future. Now maybe he'll pop back, and maybe they'll do it now, and maybe they'll move him back and he'll have 3 or 4 fights against people maybe outside of the rankings. But I think this was the time to do it, and I think this was bad matchmaking. And I said it before the fight, and I said it after the fight again. I didn't think it was great. What did you think?
Yeah, well, I saw people replying to you on Twitter saying that, oh, he asked for this fight, he turned down different fights, but you know, in the past, Joe Silva told you who you were fighting. You didn't negotiate. If you're turning down fights, you were out in the cold for a few months. You were sitting at home with no paycheck while Joe Silva gets back around to you. You know what I mean? So it was kind of take it or leave it. Now it seems people seem to be, oh, I don't want this guy, I want this guy, and seems to be a bit more accepted by the matchmakers. Which you know, you need to. These guys are obviously very confident in their abilities and want big fights and want to get to these big money, big Jeopardy, big championship or contender fights or whatever as soon as they can, you know. But they need to be, the UFC need to be the ones who do the matchmaking, not the fighters. You know, Shabazian, he definitely has, as you mentioned, he has a lot of skills, and he definitely still has a lot of potential. And maybe these fights won't affect him, but momentum and confidence, I was talking about it earlier, talking about it again now. It's definitely a big thing, you know. If you start doubting yourself or overthinking it in there, or you know, you're a split second late with a technique or a shot that you're going to get countered, and I think bringing him back and giving him a few nice matchups that he can kind of get that momentum going again, and you know, like you know, I would have expected a Joe Silva to do in the past, like, you know, we can test out his game against hand-picked opponents for a few fights, you know, get a bit of hype going, and then start moving him up the ladder. But now it just seems to be like, okay, I think, like, you know, Joe Silva definitely didn't have to deal with as many cards as the current matchmakers for most of his UFC tenure. But even still, I think recently there's been some very rushed matchups, and we always talk about with Irish guys not rushing them, and this is what can happen even to somebody as talented as Shabazian. If you move them too quick, they can, you know, be on a 2-fight losing streak and take a lot of damage, and you know, their near future performances being kind of you know, having a lot of question marks around them instead of being built up, getting hype, getting fans more into you, and kind of rounding out your game against opponents that are not cans, but opponents that, you know, are maybe, you know, not at the level of a Hermansen. You know, Hermansen might not be like the biggest name in the sport, but he's a really well-rounded, tough guy. And, you know, I think we both picked Hermansen to win this. And, you know, if they had made this fight maybe 2 years down the line after Shabazian had 4 or 5 different fights, he'd probably be picking Shabazian.
100%.
You know, so this was just unnecessarily quick. And I know people will say, oh, well, this is what he wanted, but, you know, he shouldn't be the one in control of that.
I want to fight Francis Ngannou. Does that mean I'm going to get it? Like, I like that 5 million or whatever. So that makes no sense. He wanted his fight. Like, oh my God. The job of the UFC matchmakers is to not give people these sort of fights. And I think... I'm not really slating the matchmakers as such. I'm slating the matchmaking more than anything else. I think they might need another matchmaker, or maybe 2 matchmakers, to be honest. I think you made a great point there. There are so many fights. Joe Silva was able to do it by himself. Then they got the 2 lads to do it. I think there's too much now. I really do. I think there's too many divisions, too many fighters. The problem is, it's not just... When you see a ranked guy like this and a big name who's, you know, associated with Ronda Rousey, and he's getting bad matchmaking... And then the guys who are coming in at the bottom are also kind of getting bad matchmaking and being thrown into the wolves when there's no need for it. A lot of times we see it with Jai Herbert and other guys like that as well. That is a big issue because you have malpractice at all ends of it, from the very top
even
to the
like
very bottom.
Look at Duke and Wall. What happened with that? You know,
they retired him basically.
Yeah, you know, he retired himself or whatever. But you know, things could have been extremely different if the matchmaking was different.
Yeah, I think it's something that really, and I'm not necessarily saying they're bad matchmakers, but I think they could do with another one. If I was them, I'd be throwing a lot of money at Ian Dean and trying to get him over there, because he's the sort of guy who wouldn't. I don't think he would have made that fight, you know, and I don't think he'd be throwing the guys to the wolves with these young up and coming guys coming in as well. I think he'd be matching them with 2 or 3 fights before he moved them on to someone, you know, very, very good in that division, and I think that's the way to go. But however, let's talk about a little bit about judging, so Graeme, and the Austin Vanderford versus Fabian Edwards, and I think we disagree on it a little bit, and I think a few people disagree on it. I think there's no disagreement though. Okay, let's just quickly run through what.
Well, the third round is Vanderfort, yeah.
Third round Vanderfort. I think we can
really arguing with that. Yeah. No, the second round is Fabian Edwards. I don't think many people are arguing with that, except for the judges.
Apart from the 3 judges, which is not normal. You know, I come on here every week and I stand up for the judges, and on Twitter and all, I'm very much on the side of the judges. Too much at times, some people would argue. But this second round, I can't, whenever I talk to judges, they always say, can you see an argument for it? You know, you might think it's 10-9, but can you see why someone else would give it 10-9? And the answer, like the first round here, is yes. You know, I thought it was one way, you thought it was another way. I went back and watched it, I thought it was very close. The second round, though, I cannot see a way you give this to Austin Vanderford. I just cannot. I don't think there's any way you can score this round for Vanderford, and all 3 judges gave it for him. Now, this is a little bit nitpicking. This is very inside MMA. I don't think there's anything wrong with the final decision. I think Vanderford winning the fight 29-28. I think that's fine. I think you probably had a 29-28 Edwards. We can talk about that in a second. But the second round here is the one that, to me and to you, as some people who look at judging all the time and really get into the nooks and crannies of it, I suppose, this is the sort of round that's worrying. This is the sort of round that people who don't know anything about judging say, oh, look, the judges are shit. You know, this is the sort of round that is really bad, and that shouldn't be scored for the guy it was scored for. Like, if you watched the round, Fabian Edwards wins the first, 3 minutes-ish of the round, just landing the way better shots against Austin Vanderford, landing lovely straight down through middle. Not miles ahead, you know, but clearly ahead in that round. There's a bit of clinching. Nothing is landing, and Vanderford gets a takedown with, I think, 92 seconds left. Fabian Edwards goes and lands 6 elbows from the bottom, I counted, and 6 good hard elbows. Austin Vanderford landed 1 nice hard elbow, and the round ended. To me, I think to anyone watching who's read through the criteria, that's a Fabian Edwards round. Fabian Edwards won the striking. The clinch was even, not much there. And when the fight went to the ground, Fabian Edwards clearly won it as well. So to me, that was the way that round went, and I thought it was pretty clear. We don't often see it. We don't often see horrendous judging these days, but to me, that second round was horrendous judging. Really, really bad. I don't think the whole fight overall was horrendous, but how did you score the fight overall? Did you think Edwards did enough, or did you think Van der Voort did enough?
Yeah, I completely agree about the second round. It's just so clear for Edwards. I think there's pretty much no debate there. And then the first round, like, I think the straight lefts and the two nice body kicks that Fabian Edwards landed were more than enough to win the round. I think Van der landed one nice body kick, and then the rest were kind of half shots or glove shots. Some of Fabian's were hitting the gloves as well, but I do think that Fabian won that round, but it isn't an outrageous decision like or an outrageous card like the second round. But I do think Fabian has a right to feel very hard done by in that fight. Maybe a few years ago under the different rules, it would have been a Van der Voort decision, and it would have been pretty clear cut. But nowadays, I think like I watched the first round back. Watching, the judges don't have that luxury, obviously. But watching it the first time and watching it back, I thought the same thing. I thought there wasn't much to distinguish them, but the straight lefts and the little bit of body work that went on from Fabian was better than anything Van der Voort put together. But it was a much closer round in the second, and I think the wrong guy won. But when you're in these really close fights, that can happen. He's had Fabian in his last couple of, or his 2 fights ago, he had one that maybe should have went the other way. So he can't really argue. He hasn't been hard done by over a lot of fights or anything. These things happen in MMA and sometimes in MMA. But I do think he came out more aggressive than he previously has. It was kind of the worry I had going into this is that he might kind of start slow, like he's grown a tendency to do, and he didn't explode out of the gates or anything, but he definitely was more active, and I thought that was enough to win the round, just those straight lefts and the body work. But yeah, I think the wrong guy won the fight, and I agree with you that second round was just appalling judging, really, really bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the wrong guy won the fight. I thought it was very close. Even the third round, I think Van der Voort did win it, but Fabian cut him open with that elbow and landed a good few elbows. But Van der Voort landed
at the very end. At the very end. Like if he had another 30 seconds, he might have been able to steal that round.
Yeah. It was an interesting fight. And I think it's one that I haven't watched back the first round. I scored it for Van der Voort live, and I just about scored it for Van der Voort again watching it back. I think the biggest shot of that round was the kick to the body from Van der Voort, and now I know you disagree with that, and others probably disagree with it as well, but I don't think Fabian landed anything huge in that round, or landed anything immediately impactful enough to absolutely take that round. And look, Van der Voort didn't really either, to be honest. So it was one of those ones that was very, very close, and I wouldn't criticize anyone for scoring that either way, but I wasn't surprised that Van der Voort won the third round, and I was very surprised obviously with the second round decision. But I thought it was a good performance from both guys, to be honest. Van der Voort, it's a very tough matchup against someone like Fabian Edwards, and for Fabian it's a very tough matchup against someone like Van der Voort. So it
was an encouraging performance from Edwards, even in ultimate defeat or whatever, because the last 2 fights were very lackluster, and even though one of them he got the decision, I think his performance in this fight was a lot better, and maybe this matchmaking, maybe they could have, maybe they'll do it again, maybe it'll happen again in the future, but I think it wasn't. They might need to put Fabian in there with somebody who's going to stay on the feet with him, and he can kind of get the momentum back that he's lost over the last 3 fights, and because he definitely is one of the best prospects they have in Bellator at the moment, and I think maybe if you give him the right fights, he could kind of catapult himself, and kind of like with Shabazian, he can be exposed in little parts against guys who are particularly good in one realm, and still get the victory and learn from that with the right matchmaking. But if he's in there with Van der Voort types constantly, it's going to be hard to recapture that momentum. And I think like, definitely not writing him off or anything, but I think he needs to kind of, his next fight is so important. If he loses that, there's a lot of momentum gone. There's a lot of questions around. There's going to be a lot of questions around if he's as good as we think he is. I think like all the abilities are there. I'm not doubting that. I just think maybe the execution of game plan and stuff has been letting them down.
You could see it at the start of the second round, where Van der Voort came in to go for the takedown, and he just shoved him away. He's like, no, fuck this, I'm not letting you take me down. That's what Fabian Edwards needs at all times, and it feels like that's not there at all times. And if
he's cruising in too many fights, it's just like, I can just do what I want here. He's
too good for his own good. Like, he's just too good in all areas. I always thought that was an issue with Anthony Pettis as well. He cruises in every area because he knows he's good there. But it's grand being good in certain areas, but you want to get to your areas where you're at your best and don't give the other guy a chance. And I think that's Edwards' issue a little bit. But the difference I think with an Edwards and a Shabazian is I don't think Edwards is being like completely kind of not showing up, but he hasn't got a big beat down. The two fights that he lost were two close fights, and he's well up there. He's in that competition. He is a top ranked middleweight at the moment. I don't think he needs much of a push back, but because he lost two fights, obviously he's going to not get a guy in front of him or not going to get a title shot or anything like that. So I think, as you said there, get him 2 or 3 fights, get him back in winning ways, and then give him someone right up there. And I think he will win those 2 fights, to be honest. And I think, I'd be surprised if in the next 2 years or so that Fabian Edwards is not fighting for a Bellator title or something like that. I still think he has the ability. I still think he's a very good fighter, and if they were to fight again, I think he'd beat not Shabazian, Van der Voort. So it's interesting to see how it goes. But however, I know we talked a little bit about women's MMA earlier on, but it was a big weekend for women's MMA. Altogether, Invicta came back as well, and myself and Ian will talk about more on that on the chasing back. But Karina Rodriguez won the 125-pound title. Ashley Zabaleta won the 105-pound title, and there was some wins as well for Josie Sharts, Claire Guthrie, Fatima Kleins. It was good to see them back. They were on YouTube as well for people around here with the similar sort of production and everything as they had the last time. So very, very good to see Invicta back, and obviously we did an Invicta champion in the main event in Bellator as well. Not much to say about this, to be honest, because there really wasn't much in it. Chris Cyborg defeated Leslie Smith at 4:51 in the 5th round, and Graeme, I've spent the last 2 days looking for another fight that's ended at 4:51 of round 5, and I cannot find one. There's never been one in the UFC that's ended at 4:51 of round 5. I've gone through hundreds, maybe thousands of fights to try to find one, and I cannot find one. So if someone can find one, let me know. But however, do you know what? So, look, Cyborg destroyed Leslie Smith here over 5 rounds, and Leslie Smith was a little bit unfortunate that she didn't get the moral victory of going to the decision. Here's a little bit of a thing that you probably won't hear anyone else saying. I thought Cyborg looked a little bit old. I thought she looked a little bit slower, a little bit less powerful than she did before. Now, it was a great performance, and she destroyed Leslie Smith, and she was obviously way, way better than her. But Cyborg is getting on. She's had a lot of fights. She's had 26 fights. Okay, a lot of them she's been the hammer and almost never the nail apart from one fight. But she's 35 years of age now, going to be 36 here in a month's time. And I just thought, there's this thing sometimes with Cyborg. She fights a little bit slower and she fights a little bit maybe more technical. But I thought there was a few times last night where she decided to up the pace a little bit, or on whatever night it was, where she decided to up the pace a little bit. And she just wasn't able to get the finish. Now, she did get it in the end, but I think she was trying to get rounds in and time under her belt as well. But I just thought she was a little bit slower. I think we saw a little
bit of it in the UFC. I can't remember which fight it was. What fight was it with Cyborg?
Did she fight Felicia Spencer or something like that? Or she took someone like 5 rounds?
It was somebody.
It was Felicia Spencer, I think. Yeah, that went. Hold on, let me just look at it here. I'm looking. Does it say? Oh yeah, it went to a decision. Yeah, against Felicia Spencer in the UFC.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Spencer fight in a minute. Well, we saw that maybe she's not really as good as maybe she looked in defeat in that fight. Obviously Cyborg got the job done pretty comfortably, but there was another fight. Was it Evanger, where I think she won?
Yeah.
I think she finished her. I'm just trying to load this up here. Yeah, it was the third round. She finished her, but in that fight, she did look like she didn't have the same pop and speed. And she obviously went out and beat Holly Holm and Kunitskaya after that. But I think maybe the signs of her slowing down maybe started in that fight. Sometimes you can just have a bad day at the office and stuff like that. But I do think, that huge power she has seems to, she for a long time, your safe money was Cyborg in the first round. Kind of whenever she touched somebody, it was the beginning of the end, and that isn't the case anymore.
Yeah, I do think we're being a little bit critical. I think she's trying to fight a little bit more technical, especially if the last few years fighting under Jason Prillo. I think she's done a good job of that. But even with that, I thought she was a little bit off against Leslie Smith. Now, the thing about that as well, I spoke about John Jones before, that like how much off do you need to be to lose to the people in that division? And I would suggest very off. But if you have a very good fighter coming through and they manage to sign, say, like a Kayla Harrison or someone like that to fight her, I'd be a little bit worried, and I would. I wouldn't be worried about many people to have at the moment. I think the Sinead Kavanagh fight is a fight to make. She called out Katzengano, but yeah, look, I think Cyborg, she doesn't have anyone to worry about too much at the moment. But if someone did emerge and some killer came up like Amanda Nunes, I think they might have something to look at. But probably not. Just to run quickly through the Bellator card, Leandro Higo defeated Darian Caldwell, another close decision in that one. Jalal Winnes got a win there. We mentioned Hanagai Sayed got a beautiful knockout there, as did Grant Neal, who got a lovely submission. And there were some good fights in the undercard as well. Brett Johns lost there to Danny Sabatello, who kind of took him down and dominated him on the ground for the whole fight. And as I mentioned, Shabley as well against Davis. He's a guy you really need to keep an eye on. He's one of these other really good guys coming through. Davian Franklin got a win there as well to move to 3-0. On the UFC card, on the undercard, nothing really stood out. David Dvorak got a nice rear naked choke. Court McGee put on a good performance. They were calling it sensational on the commentary desk. I'm not sure about that one, but Bruno De Silva got a beautiful knockout over Victor Rodriguez. Ben Rothwell and Chris Barnett.
Your boy Chris Barnett.
The funniest fight of the year, without a shadow of a doubt. It was. I'd pay fucking $60 if I was in America for this fight. One of the most hilarious fights I've ever seen. Just beautiful stuff. This was the apex of the UFC. This is what we want to see, I think, as fans of MMA. But this main card was just. Okay, you take away Hermanson Shabazian, which was an interesting fight and a fight we talk about, but Ramos versus Algio, Dumont versus Spencer, Vandera versus Stafford, those three fights, I barely watched them. I'm not even going to lie. All three of them went to decision, one split decision. Does anyone care about those fights? Like, let's be honest there. It was one of those main cards where, like, this is a fucking undercard. Like, and I'm not saying these people are bad fighters and all, and they could definitely emerge and even
they're going to take whatever spot they're given. They're not choosing.
Them, but like, this is not a UFC main card. There's Hermanson and Shabazian fight, Esparza, Jonan, and Garbrandt Font. Absolutely, three very good fights. I would have just made a 3-fight main card. I know with the television and stuff, it's not like that. But if you could, that's what you would have done here. This is not a UFC quality main card. Absolutely, the furthest thing you could see from it. And I it wasn't great. So we must talk about Esparza versus John Ando before we go. That was a brilliant display by Carlos Esparza, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely a dominant performance, but I think Jan's ground game got exposed in a big way. Mm-hmm. Esparza, we haven't really seen, like, back in the day in Invicta, when she was champion and stuff like that, she was kind of dominant, but in her wrestling, as dominant as this in her wrestling. But it's been a while since we've seen her have it so easy. And maybe she's turned a corner and improved, but I don't think so. I think it was just Jan was just just exposed on the ground and didn't really offer much of anything in terms of resistance. So like big win. I thought Jan would get it done. I thought, you know, she'd be able to use her striking and as far as maybe, you know, her takedowns aren't exactly explosive, but she just had no answer for simple takedowns.
Yeah, I thought the same. I thought Jan was going to win this fight, but credit to Carla Esparza. She's one of those people where she look, when Carla Esparza came in and she won the title and she beat a very inexperienced Rose Namajunas, I think a lot of people thought she was kind of like Nika Montano, the kind of the placeholder for that division, and then she was kind of, you know, Joanna Jędrzejczyk came in and absolutely murked her, and I thought, and I think a lot of people thought, right, that's the last we'll see of Carla Esparza in a title fight now. You know, I think everyone thought maybe she'd hang around the UFC or fight for a while, but for her to come back and fight her way back, and I think she deserves a title shot, and I think she's going to get the title shot now. Unbelievable, and a great credit to Carla Esparza, and it's you know, it's one of those fighters and one of those runs that other fighters look at and go, oh, you know, maybe I can do that. maybe it's not over. Maybe, you know, maybe things can get a little bit better. And they can't always. And it takes something special. It takes someone special. I think Carla Esparza is that. Will she win the title fight? We'll see about that. I probably won't be picking her again, but I haven't picked her probably in a few fights, and she's gone out and won them. So you can't rule her out. So you know, I must mention that. Fair play to Carla Esparza. Right, Graeme, a couple of questions. We haven't been taking as many questions recently because I've been doing the Q&A, but we will lash a few questions in here. Okay, the first one from Still Champ asks about Paul Felder and what we think of his career after he retired last night. Looking forward to his next one would be, I suppose, my my first reaction to it. But Paul Felder is one of these guys, you know, that has been he came into the UFC and he was kind of like trying to become a ranked fighter for a good while, then became it. You know, he had a very good win over...
He kind of came in as Cowboy's mate.
Mate and training partner. And, you know, he beat Danny Castillo, obviously lost to Edson Barboza and Ross Pearson, but I think wins over the likes of Darren Cruikshank and Josh Berkman, and even, you know, he's a win over Charles Oliveira. I think it was Charles Oliveira's last loss in 2017.
Even his performance against Edson Barboza the first time, you know, he lost the fight, but he held his own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he was always one of those guys. He always gave people a tough fight, and, you know, he beat Edson Barboza the second time around, then lost the last two to Dan Hooker and Rafael Dos Anjos to split decisions. You know, 4 of his last 5 fights split decisions, 1 win and 3 losses, and that's tough, you know, as well, when you're in lots of close fights like that. If let's say he'd won them, he'd be on a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fight winning streak, and he'd probably be getting a title shot now, you know. And it was Mike Perry, Dan Hooker, Rafael Dos Anjos, not exactly like things that you fighters that you couldn't hope that he might beat at some stage, especially the Mike Perry one, I think. But overall, I think when Paul Felder came in, we saw what he was, and he kept on that spinning back fist for a while, for a few fights, and then he kind of got out of that, and I think he gradually improved all the time. And I think Felder was one of these guys, a little bit like a Kenny Florian, who we mentioned as well earlier on, who got the best, I think, out of his ability and got the best out of his career. I don't think he's the most athletically gifted fighter in the world, and I don't think he's the most powerful or quick fighter in the world, but he was a smart guy, a good technical fighter. He fought in a way that suited him, and that's all you can do, and fought, you know, at the very top against, you know, guys like Oliveira and Barboza and Hooker and Dos Anjos, a former champion obviously as well. A good career, you know, not one of those guys where he wasn't ever in the title range, wasn't ever in the at the very, very top of the division, but always, you know, ranked for the last 3 or 4 years. So, you know, a very good career for Paul Felder. The sort of guy as well who I think might actually say retired. What? Probably not.
Just, but you know, if I believe any of these, I just feel like a fool afterwards, because I know deep down that it's you know, the chances of it actually going through are just so small historically. If you look at the data, and if you just remember all these guys who has actually stayed retired, you know, Cole Conrad and Cole Penrad.
Mm-hmm. Neil Seary.
Neil Seary, yeah, Neil Seary. He retired a few times though, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
I think they all did.
Conor McGregor, he said retired. Oh wait, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't. Yeah, I think that's.
I'm looking forward to Habib versus Felder in a few months.
Alan Joban retires.
A three-way.
Yeah, that Alan Joban video package they played, I was like, it was nice, but I'm like, Alan Joban was like an okay fighter for a good few years, but like, oh come on.
And he'll be back as well. So what are we doing here?
He will. A very good question here, Chris Murphy. Who has improved more since their strawweight title fight, Carla Esparza or Rose Namajunas? I would say Rose. I think.
Rose,
yeah,
definitely.
Rose, but
Carla, she had so much more room to grow as well, I suppose, and it was so much greener.
Yeah, I think that was the difference. And last one here, and we'll answer the rest over on Tuesday on the Q&A. And as well, I must mention that's on Patreon. I mentioned it earlier in the podcast as well, but the podcast I've coming up on Wednesday with Spencer Kite, the State of the UFC, and absolutely jam-packed hour and a half of a chat, and Spencer
the absolute state of the UFC.
Yeah, I think you listened to Graeme. It was a fun podcast on it. Spencer was really, really good, and if I know maybe not everyone in Irish MMA has listened to Spencer and podcasts and stuff before, he's brilliant. I'm definitely going to have him on again.
Very knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable, very, very knowledgeable. Before we actually get to the last question, let's give us a shout out to FightPicks as well. Head on over to fightpicks.com. Get your picks in. There's a few cards coming up in the next couple of weeks. I know there's no for 2 weeks, but you can get your picks in anyway, get them in early. Download the app, go over to iOS or Android and get the app and get your picks in. So go to fightpicks.com, follow them on Twitter as well at FightPicks. Join the Severe MMA League. I think it's ending in the next week or so, that league as well. So we will be crowning a winner. We might even extend it until the next fight night, just so everyone has a chance to get to the last one. But so the winner will be crowned.
It was a nice victory for me in this week's fight card.
Was it? Did you finish top? Did you?
Yeah. I'm catching up on you. I'm only 20 odd points behind you now after missing a week. So I think we all know what would happen if I had got my Nostradamus-esque picks in that week.
Let's just have a quick look here and see who's top of the league. Where's my leaderboard? Okay, Turbo Jugend is number 1. I'm down in number 5 with 728 points. So, you know what? Kalen number 2, he could win it if he gets a couple of big ones in the next one. But you know, it's close there. So there's a lot of fighting still to be done on the last week. I will extend it until after next Sunday or Sunday week. So looking forward to that there. We will be crowning a winner. And thanks to everyone who's taken part. It's been really, really fun, and hopefully we'll be able to do something like that again in the not too distant future. But last question here, Graeme, and I think this is an interesting one. Gavin Springett. Is Cody overrated like Tony, the one with the striking ended constantly going for takedowns? What do you think? Do you think Cody Garbrandt is overrated?
Depends how people rate him now. I think he was better than he is. I think he deservedly was the champion. But now I think he has a lot to prove. And I'm not sure he can do it anymore. He's not it's not a complete write-off. Maybe if he has more time at Mark Henry, I'm not the biggest fan of Mark Henry. I know you're not either. But you need time, no matter who the coach is, to, like, TJ didn't just start with Dwayne and have this way better striker than he had before. It takes time, so Cody could turn it around, but I just think he's not going to. Yeah.
Look, is Cody overrated? A little bit, I think, but
it depends how you rate him, because I think, I picked Font in that fight. I think a lot of people picked Font. I think like a few years ago, Cody Garbrandt would have been the pick, pretty unanimously, but I think people are kind of have lowered their expectations of him. I think he's not rated as highly in my mind as he was before anyway.
Yeah, although I think the Cody Garbrandt that beat Dominic Cruz is a fantastic fighter. Like, that fighter on that night, I think it's hard to overrate how good he was. So, what has come after that is a little bit different, but I think there's maybe some circumstances. He's had bad injuries and he's, getting knocked out a couple of times has taken him away. But if you were to say like he's one of the best bantamweights of all time, maybe that's overrating him. But if you were to say him and his performance against Dominic Cruz was one of the best we've ever seen, or in bantamweight history or title fight history or whatever, I don't think that's an overestimation. I think it was. I think it was a fantastic display. But
yeah, and he had time to practice that because he was doing it for Uriah Faber. He was doing it for his other. He was basically the guy that would mimic Dominic Cruz for years. So he'd worked on that. So maybe he can do that with Mark Henry. But yeah, time will tell. That's the thing about MMA. We'll soon see. But I have my doubts.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I suppose just before we go, a quick update. Irish MMA is kind of on the way back as well. Ian Gary fighting for the Cage Warriors title against Jack Grant at Cage Warriors 125. Joe McColgan as well fighting for the lightweight title against Agi Sagdari. That's a big fight on the same card. And on the same card again, Decky McAleenan is fighting Stephen McIntosh. So some big fights announced for Irish MMA this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. And we'll obviously have a big breakdown of that. But I said I just mentioned them here at the end of this podcast so we can look at what's going to be coming going forward. So I'm looking forward to that. I think Palahan has a fight as well, not too far down. Ian interviewed him, so if you want to check that out, it's over on the Severe MMA YouTube. We mentioned Takamanda a couple of weeks ago as well. He signed. We announced it over in Severe MMA for EFC Worldwide, and not a bad time for Irish MMA. So I'm looking forward to talking about that more in the coming weeks. Right, everybody, thank you very much for listening, and then all that's left to do is give the inspirational quote of the week. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. We'll see you next Tuesday, or probably Sunday.